Hi, I'm Mike, the creator of Ways We Mage and the author of Ways We Enjoy Magic Cards. Today I am going to show you how I will build the feature set that will allow authors and readers of the book to include cards in their lists, um, because people who buy the book are allowed to make lists of content on wayswemage.com. They can be listicles, they can be top 10 lists, they can be lists of websites or streams or questions or tips. And including cards in those lists is a cool way to make them more searchable and make them more colorful. So today we're going to build that out. I want to give a shout out to everyone who's at Gen Con this weekend. Hope to see all of you at HasCon. And I want to remind you, please read my book, Ways We Enjoy Magic Cards, before HasCon, because you guys are the experts and I really value your feedback. The book is designed to bring more people into the game, and it's designed to show people the many different ways that they can engage in the culture without really breaking a sweat. And I am. I know there's a lot of wisdom that you all can bring to me from the attempts that you've made to bring people into the game. So please read it before HasCon. If you don't have a credit card or Bitcoins and you can't make the $2 purchase, what you should do is encourage a friend or family member to buy it and then give you one of the 4 gift copies that you get with every purchase. And if that's not possible for you, just reach out to me and we'll see if we can make an arrangement. Okay. So the first thing that I do when I work on my development system is I open up 3 terminals. I move into the project directory and I start a Rails server. I use this lighter colored one for modifying files. So I'm going to open my text editor. And then this one I use for a Rails console, so I can directly interact with my code and the database. So I have a model for cards, storing each card in the Magic universe, and a model for listed items, which are connected to lists. Each listed item belongs to a list. And what I'm going to do in order to attach cards to listed items is create another model. Now, in the long run, I fully expect that I will be attaching cards to other models, including lists themselves, chapters, paragraphs, citations, possibly books. There have been some cases in Magic's history where people wrote an entire book about a single card, and I'm sure there will be cases in the future where people write books that heavily focus on a small group of cards. If you would like to write a book on my platform, please contact me, and I have a web-based writing and editing system that will allow you to very easily keep your book up to date, and you can deliver it with the same mechanisms that I use, which includes giving away those gift copies. I'll have a video out on that by tomorrow. So in order to create the model that I am using to attach cards to listed items, the first step is naming the model. And this is a very important step. It's kind of a big mountain to climb right at the beginning of our process. I try to use very descriptive and specific and also flavorful nouns when I am doing this process. And I also try to use very good verbs and good grammar in other parts of my process. So often what I will do is open up a thesaurus. I don't know why that happened. Here we go. My built-in thesaurus. And I thought about this a little bit before starting the feed. I think inclusion is a noun that makes sense to me. Now, I wouldn't say inclusion is the best noun for attaching a card to a list. I think relevance or discussion is probably a little bit more accurate. Relevance is not, it is a noun, but it doesn't always feel like one. Relevant is, it's an adjective. And since I like to use flavorful nouns that are very memorable and very fun, I thought inclusion had a little bit of flavor, since when you include a card in your deck, or you could say a card is an auto-include in green decks. It also has a little bit of a call to action, which is very important, especially when a new platform is just getting off the ground and it's kind of got this like empty box syndrome, or blank page syndrome, you could call it. Now, these nouns don't necessarily appear to the end user, particularly when they're a join table like this, but based on the way that I develop my systems, they usually do pop up here and there, and a savvy user will be exposed to them if they know where to look. So I like to use things that's kind of like a little bit of a wink or inside joke. So I considered discussion, which is also a term that I really appreciate in terms of the flavor that it gives to the process, because it's not as much something is being handed down from on high. It's more like a suggestion that is open to criticism. And I think that is a really useful concept, especially in the modern era of Magic, where even the advice from the pros about deck building, I think, it can be taken with a grain of salt, because the game has become so synergistic that it doesn't take much for those suggestions to be incorrect or to be circumstantial. And so card discussion. I do think I want to put card on the beginning of this term. I don't always mention the attached models, and sometimes I will make something more flexible, like as opposed to just including a card in a list, you could include a deck in a list. And I might use the same join table for both of those things. Discussion is, or inclusion or discussion without putting card on the front of it would, be a smarter choice if that was my plan. But it's not. I do want to give special treatment to cards, because cards are such a nicely structured data set that they really give just a clear runway into a lot of different searching styles. Decks, you could make the same argument for decks, but the searching techniques would be a lot more complicated. So I think it's fine to keep those things separate. There's also to a certain extent, there are performance considerations for having both ends of the relationship be polymorphic, meaning that they can attach to different types of models. So let's see what I have here under the thesaurus of discussion. Debate, exchange, consultation, deliberation, powwow. Consultation calls out to me, but at this point we're getting a little far afield from the actual process of what we're doing. And we also don't want to put too much pressure and too much we want to make it, I want to encourage people to do this a lot. I mean, they don't necessarily need to include every card that's mentioned, but all the ones that are, relevant to the discussion. Inclusion. The other term that I considered was insertion, because I thought about putting a card into a book, putting it in as a bookmark, as the metaphor for how that would be relevant to this process. And I don't think that this is, I don't think it's a good enough fit for what I'm doing. We could use that as the verb, maybe part of our interface, or maybe part of our call to action. But for now, I'm going to go with inclusion. So Rails G model card inclusion. Okay, so at this point I could say card belongs to, and then the thing that I'll include it in. What is a noun that I can use for the list or the book or the chapter or the item? So I could say context. Could say piece, as in like a piece of writing. I kind of like piece, actually. Let's see. A written composition. Column, composition, review, item. Oh, that's interesting that it's also, a piece is also a term that people use when they're talking about deck building. So you include it in a piece, include a card. I think piece is winning for now. And a nice thing is that we can change these later on. Okay. So this thing that I'm doing where I include the names of attributes on the same line as the generation command, that will create certain defaults for the way that the model manages data. So I'm thinking about whether to generate a model or whether to generate a resource. A resource would also include a controller, which is a file that sets up some tools for the users to engage with the model, to create instance of it, to edit them. I think that although I do want a controller, for now I'm going to simply generate the model. Okay. So I'm not sure if I got this syntax totally right, so let's see what it generated. It tells me which files here. The first one I'm going to look at is this migration. Okay. So it obviously recognized what I was trying to do. I think that bodes well for how it, I think that bodes well for me having the right idea there with my syntax. It did not add the correct thing here, though. So perhaps it just took the word that I wrote here and put it here. I don't think it would do that, but let's find out what happens. Okay. Basically, to store a polymorphic association, you need to create an integer and a string. The string says what type of object you're connecting it to. The integer says which one. Okay, so let's see. Do I need anything else here? Normally, I make the content go through an approval step so that I can make sure that there's no inappropriate content that's displayed to the public. Including cards, I think there's a very, very slim chance that that would be a publicly offensive thing to do. At least, within the sort of ethical realm and also the legal considerations. Another thing that I'm considering is whether to store information about who it was that associated this card with this piece. For the moment, only the person who created the list is going to be able to edit the list, so it will be implied who it was that added the cards. In the near future, I'm planning to expand that to allow list management tools that allow you to nominate other users to also help edit your lists. But for now, I'm not doing that, so I think it's probably better to postpone storage of that data. Okay, so it looks like just keeping this at the bare minimum is going to be possible. So it's just a join table. All it stores is 2 IDs. There's no status, there's no owner. And rake db migrate. Okay. It didn't work. I don't know if I meant the polymorphic. Okay, so I was right. It actually did just take what I wrote and pump it into that file. So I'm going to say t dot I might be able to. I'll just write this stuff out. So we're going to say t dot string piece type t dot string or t dot integer rather piece ID. Okay, so I'm actually not going to add a foreign key constraint because the database won't know which table to look at. The database, I don't think, has native support for polymorphic foreign keys. So the foreign key thing, I think, basically just, it's not an index, it's a constraint. Anyway, that's not important. We'll be just fine without that. All we need to store is a string and an integer. and those should both be required. It won't make sense to save one of these without all three pieces of information. But again, I'm not going to worry about that on the database level. I'm going to worry about that on the Ruby level. And actually, with the current version of Rails, anything that belongs to is by default required. So we're already set there. Okay, so now I'm going to try running this again. This is Rails 5, by the way. It's an incredible release of Rails. I mean, they all are, but I very highly encourage you to use this version, especially because of the fabulous implementation of TurboLinks that really sped up the end user experience. I'm really excited to get into some action cable coding for live updating pages so that when people edit a list, it will update live for everyone who's viewing the list. And also very excited to do some caching so that I will be able to make the site responsive enough for thousands of users to use every day. I'll probably do those updates as videos. So if you have any questions about that process, go ahead and get in touch with me. All right. So we have now updated the database so that it will save our data. The next thing that I'm going to do is go to card, say has many card inclusions. I'll go to listed item, has many card inclusions as piece, and then I can go back to card has many listed items through card inclusions, and this has many cards. Okay, so now I need an interface to allow list managers to add the cards. And what I have decided to do is allow them to type in the name of a card into a text box. It's possible that the best interface here will be some kind of an autocomplete field so that they don't have to type the full name in that text box. But for the first implementation of this, I think that using a text box is a plan that appeals to me. So there's kind of two ways to peel this onion, from the outside in or the inside out. Sometimes I like to write code in such a way that I write the method first and then call the method. That way there's never any errors that occur during the development process. I mean, there are still bugs when I need to adjust something to get it right. But in the normal situation, if I write the code first and then call the code, then there are never any errors. The other way to do it is to create the interface first and then start filling in the blanks of what that interface needs to be functional. And that one is sometimes advantageous because you don't get ahead of yourself and building things that you're not going to need. So yeah, I'll go ahead and go that route. Okay, so I'm already logged in, so I'll go to a list that I manage, like podcasts. This is not a great example of what I would attach a card to. Um, let's see. Here's a much better example. Okay, so my current implementation has cards being displayed on hover, but in order to see all the cards at once, I've had to go through and build this other implementation. And